So, to just continue, I was kind of transitioning from, escapism into recovery. And you said something else in your Medium article that really stood out to me. And it was through witchcraft, I found a language that could hold my pain and transmute it into power. Ritual became a container for emotions too big for words. Candles replaced chaos, breath replaced panic, and the altar became a mirror where my inner child could finally see herself as sacred. So good.
Mm,
So, with that, I kind of want to know what does being a witch mean, and how did it help you with this, release process, with being in recovery and connecting with your own divinity, all of it. So, what is a witch and
yeah.
what does this ritual mean to you?
Yeah, I think I well you kind of got to start off saying I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 13 years of my life.
Wow.
Um and I at the age of 11 years old, I asked our parish priest um I wanted to be an altar girl. I like doing activity. I like being a part of church. I liked part of being a part of mass. I really enjoyed, this kind of spiritual expression of life. I did. And that priest told me no, and I didn't understand it. And I was like, but these other churches that I've been at have, altar girls. And his response to me was, not in my church. And so I was like, this is where it started, where I started to like seek my own divinity, so to speak. I was like,
Yeah.
this is bullshit, and as I said, I went to Catholic school, so I would start to like ask my teachers in religion class about certain things and just really started to seek. And it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I walked into a metaphysical store for the first time and I actually felt like I'd found home. And it wasn't home
Mm.
as in like the place, but it was home as in they had all of the knowledge that I'd been seeking. They had answers that I had not, answers I didn't even know I had questions for yet, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and so,
powerful.
you know, I I started to identify as a witch at about the age of 16. And I don't know that I could have told you then what that meant. Then I probably would have described it more so as to what I referred to as an individual that practiced reactive magic. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is if something was going on in my life that I thought I needed some help for, I would do a spell, right? People would say a prayer. I'd pray to God, right? No, well, no, I would do a spell. I'd grab a candle, I'd grab some crystals, I'd grab some herbs, and I'd say some words. And it wasn't until I stepped into recovery and I was about 90 days approaching my 90 meetings in 90 days because I stepped into recovery around the 12-step tables, and I started asking myself, like, what am I going to do to stay sober every day? Right? Like, what am I going to do? Because I can't go to a meeting every single day. It was hard to do 90 meetings in 90 days. That was like complicated. And so I looked around the tables at all of the folks that had an extended period of time, and I realized the one thing that they had in common is they all had some kind of strong spiritual faith amongst them, right? All
Yep.
different. The neighborhood that I currently live in is half Muslim, half Christian. So it
Mm.
wasn't like one thing. Like I could just see they all had some kind of strong spiritual faith. And so I really had to sit there and ask myself, like, what is mine then? What is mine? And I realized it was this like belief in this practice of being a witch. And so over the course of, the last number of years, because I've been asked this question, like, what is a witch? Like, what does that mean? I have created what I refer to as my philosophy of a witch, what makes a witch.
Hmm.
And that is first off, it's three pillars. It's the belief in the practice of the psychic arts,
Mm.
right? Believing that my intuition is correct, that I can, this could be using tarot, pendulum, this could be astrology actually is a form of divination, right?
Yeah.
Astrology, tells us things. So the belief in the practice in the psychic arts, the belief in the practice in magic and ritual. And so magic and ritual allows us the belief in like kind of magic that we can shift and change energy through our intention and our actions. Right? We
Yes.
can bring changes about in our lives through our intentions and our actions. That's the belief of magic and ritual. And the third one is the belief in the practice that we are to be of service in the world.
Hmm.
That service can be as beautiful as being a parent and raising humans, right? Or this could be as grand as starting an entire movement so that individuals who identify as a witch have support in their recovery journeys, right? It can be any gamut of any of those. And
Hmm.
so I did, and I realized what I'd been doing with my practice up until that point was again reactive. If I needed something. And so I had to say, this isn't if I don't need this when I like just need a spell. I need this every single day in my life if I'm going to stay sober. Right. And so this was engaging in the psychic arts on a daily basis. This
Hmm.
was engaging in magic and ritual on a daily basis. This was being of service on a daily basis. These things every single day. And there's not, I don't think there's a single day that continues to go by that I'm not engaged in the three of those things in some way, shape, or form.
I'm so glad you said that because it's like the escapist tendencies and the numbing tendencies that we engage in our daily practices. So it's like, of course, our healing, our recovery, our connecting with our own divinity again, that has to be daily too. It's
Yeah.
natural, I think, when you're trying to help yourself to only think about, okay, I'm going to do this when I need it. But I think you being honest and vulnerable as well, it started as something when I needed help, but then I realized, no, I need this daily. I think that's a very human very spiritual way too of naturally kind of integrating, our divine nature and ritual in a way that's realistic for most people it starts with what you said before about the realization that something's not right. It starts with reconnecting with pieces of our childhood. In your case, part of it was wanting to be an altar girl, but experiencing some of the bullshit that came with not allowing you to do that. But then just growing into it as, oh, okay, I can still pursue magic. I can create my own space to do this and find myself in the process. And so, what do your psychic gifts look like for you? How have they manifested for you, kind
Mm.
of in combination with witchcraft?
Yeah, I've had these gifts since I was a child, and I realized after I was, in recovery and sober and all of that kind of stuff, all of the various different ways that they show up, right? And so I've had them since I was a child. And you know, when I stopped drinking, I'm going to back up. When I didn't realize that what I was listening to was, kind of my higher self when I left that marriage.
Hmm.
I didn't realize so much that it was my higher self that I was listening to when I left that abusive job 2 years later, right? I told you that CEO and the ex-husband. So left that abusive job 2 years later. I didn't realize that all along this way that I was really being guided by my guides, by spirit, by the universe, by the divine, by this part of me. Like, and what I believe is we are, we are all divine. We have divinity within us, and it is that divinity that is within us that is able to hear and to listen, you know, travel towards the path that is the highest vibrational path to us.
Hmm.
And so I remember I remember being around the tables. I said 12-step tables about a month in, and again had these gifts my entire life. Just never practice them, never use them every day. And I remember being around the tables and seeing my grandfather sit at the tables with me and having the realization that my grandfather ended up in my grandmother's life. That was her fifth husband. My grandmother's life because of the 12th step. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and he ended up on her front doorstep helping my uncle who was struggling with his own addictions. Yeah, so this like spirit just started to speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I started my first kind of active service really, was January 20th of 2020. I decided I was going to quote unquote go to church every week on Tuesday night. And the way that I was going to do it is I fired up a Facebook page and I would go live every Tuesday night giving away free readings, tarot card readings. That
Oh,
was that was my act of service. That's how that service
yeah.
started. And so like my own intuition, my own psychic gifts, I have said I made the decision when I stepped into recovery, and I was probably at this point about 2 months in. And at some point when you're in the 12th step, they'll tell you that the third step is the time that we like communicate with our higher power. And there's something that they call the third step prayer. And this is the prayer that we call to that higher power. And in my third step, I literally have, and I say this prayer every day and have ever since I kind of wrote it, and it's evolved. But I say, please, at one point I say, please continue to surround me, guide me, protect me, taking me down a path in life that leads me to more peace, love, happiness, hope, joy, and prosperity. Allow me to remain in the passenger seat and let go of all control and sit back and just enjoy life. I gave over and surrendered at that point and said, I'm going to trust in you that you are going to take me where I need to take me. So you asked, how do my gifts play a role? My connection to the divine and listening to the divine through these psychic gifts is so core to my recovery that the day I started to second guess any of the messages, any of the guidance that I'm given is the day I'm a step closer to a relapse.
Wow. That's beautiful. And what I can see is that it's so connected to it's like it's so easily integrated into what the 12 step already is. It's like the spirits were right there with you saying, yes, we can use these tools. We can work with you. This is practical. The spiritual so often is practical. Sometimes people don't realize that, but it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly profound that you recognized that. And so from what I understand, this has gone even bigger. And you have a business now, right, to help people. It's called the Sovereign Phoenix. Am I
Mm-hmm.
correct? Can you tell us about that and how your business can help others who are seeking recovery?
Yeah, so I've listened to spirit throughout the entire time, and it's taken me in some really strange places. And I'm, this is why I jokingly said I think earlier, sometimes I've thrown a couple of temper tantrums. Maybe I didn't say that, but I was thinking it, but I have. And so at some point in 2024, I knew, right? Again, the ruminating thoughts start to happen. I knew I needed to leave the corporate job. And I thought that I was going to I thought that I was going to be the professional psychic medium that I was, and that I was going to teach people how to use their psychic gifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was about a month out. I'd left the corporate job. I was completely burnt out because I had been doing this full-time corporate job and the professional psychic medium at the same time. Um, and I was completely burnt out. And I told myself when I left, I was going to take some downtime. And I realized that I hadn't, that I somehow had just jumped right back into a bunch of doing things and, wasn't practicing being. And I was in tears and I was crying and I was just like, what am I going to do? What am I doing? And I heard spirit say, are you ready? And I said, ready for what? Maybe, I don't know. And they said, you're here to help other witches in recovery. And so it started at that point. So I started to kind of like take a look at everything that I thought that I was going to be like doing. And I started to revise all of it into what I refer to now as the sober witch life movement. This is, we started the recovery circles. We'll be celebrating, doing the witches recovery circles for 2 years this coming September. So we started that. And so like now I'm on this path and we end up, right? I mean, I guess this would have been in beginning of 2025. And I think 2025 was around the time at the beginning that there was like the big political inauguration of the
Mm-hmm.
world that we're currently in today. And I started to like really think about what does this mean, and I made this realization at that point that if the world starts to change in the way that some of these things are predicting, not to get too political, but if the world starts to change into this way and my practice of witchcraft and my spiritual belief starts to become threatened, that's going to threaten my recovery. And so I started thinking about this and I was like, okay, well, we're going to keep this was like even more reason as to what I needed to do. Like I needed to keep on to this. And around the same time, again, spirit is weird and strange sometimes how it shows up to you. Like, our
Mm-hmm.
intuition just shows up. I started thinking about and seeing like churches, and like being interested in like old church buildings and going like, wouldn't that be interesting if we had a church, to like run workshops in and, do ritual? And wouldn't this be interesting if we had a church? And it was probably around May, around this time last year, where I get this like huge download that it's not a building that I need to create. It's a church, it's a religious organization that needs to be created because
Mm-hmm.
we still live in a country that believes in religious freedom. Regardless of what threats there may be, it still exists. It is still legally a right that we have in this country. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started to go down all of the work that needed to be done, all of the research, all of the prep work, so that October 20th of last year, we incorporated the Sovereign Phoenix as a federally recognized religious nonprofit here within the United States.
Wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations on that.
thank you. Thank you. Um, because I truly know now, after doing all of this, that there are so many of us that are out there that feel ostracized just from the addiction in the first place, but
Mm-hmm.
then completely like alone in their recovery or are being forced to recover in ways that truly aren't aligned with what their beliefs are.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
huge. And why
Mm-hmm.
I think it fails for so many people is because they are being forced into this one way, but it doesn't align. And so that's really fantastic. And I couldn't help but think of something I share with my audience about because I talk a lot about this collective healing that's needed and how it's going to come from other ways that we haven't seen yet. It's going to
Yeah.
be this creative force that kind of rises. It's going to be this evolved thing that, although we can pull resources and the connection that we need from the religious structures that we're familiar with and that we're drawn to, what we are, what we're evolving into is becoming, something that will hopefully create a world that is actually headed toward true equality. And some of the corruption that we're seeing so openly in the structures of our society, be it the federal government or businesses, the one gift I think that's given us is that it's kind of becoming exposed,
Mm-hmm.
for what it really is. And that kind of opens the door to, okay, what is another way? This way isn't right. Any way that doesn't encourage equality for all is not right. And so what what is this other way? And I can't help but feel that the sovereign phoenix, this thing that you've been called by spirit to build, could be a huge part of that, especially because it's so centered on breaking cycles and recovery and ritual, all these things that are so naturally human and so naturally divine, but used in a restorative way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, in the interest of time, I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you'd like to share with my audience or anything else you wanted to share about that I haven't asked you about yet?
You know, what's popping into my mind is, I'm talking and have had a lot of conversations here about my recovery from, um, both the ex-husband, but also the alcohol. And so the Sovereign Phoenix is about recovery from anything that you get to define.
Hmm.
Okay. It's not just substance use. The way that we describe it, this is like recovery from, I say in one of my prayers, I pray for individuals that are still suffering from addiction, whether that addiction is drugs, alcohol, sex, chaos, violence, drama, shopping, food, sugar, right? It's also for anybody that is recovering from codependency, from self-abandonment. Think about any of these individuals that, may have believed in magic but have had just been forced to not live the life that they truly desire and want to live, right? They're recovering from abuse, they're recovering from trauma, right? And so part of the whole sovereign point is we don't get to define what you're stepping into recovery for.
Hmm.
We don't get to define how you do that. We don't get to define your recovery path. We don't get to we don't get to define if you are recovering from substance use, if you're using harm reduction or medically assisted treatment. This isn't for us. What we are here to do is support you on a journey where you can let go of the shame and the guilt and can move closer and closer to the life that you truly deserve and are desiring of living,
Hmm.
right? So I say all that to say, like, if you are in like this, these paths don't always exist, and if they exist, they're through multiple doors. So you have to leave pieces of yourself outside before you step into each of those doors. The
Yeah.
goal with the Sovereign Phoenix is you never have to leave a single piece of yourself outside.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I'm glad that you said that because I think that just makes it so welcoming for people who are interested. And I am going to link your website in my show notes. So for all of you out there, if you'd like to learn more about Sunshine Witchski and the Sovereign Phoenix and what they do, I'm going to put all the resources there. Is it okay if I end on something that you said again in the Medium article? Because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of this article you wrote, you said, may your recovery be more than sobriety. May it be a homecoming. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were simply waiting for someone brave enough to come back and find you. And that someone is you. I love that. It's like so much of what we're conditioned to believe encourages, like you said, self-abandonment or separation from our own divinity. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that we have so much of a divine nature inside of us, and we are the key to our own healing. And so that was just so, so beautiful.
Mm.
And I can't thank you enough for coming. I'm so grateful that you did. Um, did you want to say bye to my audience members real quick before I sign off?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I hope everybody has a beautiful rest of your day. I know we're recording this right before summer starts. So may your summer be filled
Mhm.
with delight, joy, and all sorts of play.
Yes. Thank you again. This has been Hello, my name is Jenna, on air with the pink-haired sober witch, Sunshine Witchski.